evening, we are now recording. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and others. Good evening, everyone. How about that? Uh, Welcome to Stories by Leslie Grassa. If you don't know, this is Leslie's capstone project for her master's in divinity from Naropa University. And assuming that everything goes well, she will be graduating with her second master's degree in about a month. So thank you all for being here and being part of this event and helping complete the cycle by being the audience, which is of course the essential final ingredient. My name is Jay Gibson King. I'm an old friend of Leslie's. We worked together back in Salem, Oregon, which is where I am currently am. When we were together on Salem Playback Theater, along with Rob Patton, who is also our stage manager tonight. So it's a bit of a reunion for us. A little bit of business before we get started. Leslie will be performing using a Zoom feature called Spotlight. So if you're currently looking at like a whole bunch of boxes on your screen, what you want to do is to go up to the top right on your Zoom screen where it says View and switch over to Speaker View. And that will highlight Leslie and make sure that she takes up the entire screen. Everybody else, I would ask you to turn off your cameras at this time to allow Leslie to take center stage. Thank you all very much. Please stay muted and off camera during the performance. And please also, we're on Zoom etiquette. Please avoid using the chat during the performance. We will have a talk back after. So as soon as the performance is done, we'll be able to ask questions, come on camera, share out, do all of our kind of regular theater things. You will also be able to share some of your own experiences in response to the performance. So that is, if you have time to stick around, we'll do maybe 30 minutes as soon as the show's ended. So please stick around for that. Again, the performance is being recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, then you would want to keep your camera off during the talkback as well. So just be warned. Please no flash photography. If you need to leave your seat, you may be admitted. You may be readmitted at any time. That is one of the perks of this format. And I think that is all of the business. All right, very good. Welcome to Stories by Leslie Grassa.
There is fiction in the space between the lines on your page of memories. Write it down, but it doesn't mean you're not just telling stories. There is fiction in the space between you and reality. You will do and say anything to make your everyday life seem less mundane. There is fiction in the space between you and me. One day when I was 4, my father took me to the park near our house. He pushed me on the swing. I went down the slide. There was a fire pole, yet I was afraid to slide down it. Then we went home. One day, when I was 4, my father took me to the park near our house. I loved my dad so much, and it was so exciting to spend time together, just him and me. He pushed me on the swing, and I flew into the air, laughing with glee. I scrambled up the ladder and went down the slide, and he caught me at the bottom. Then he encouraged me to go down the fire pole, but I was scared. He tried again, saying I'd be fine and he'd catch me like he did on the slide. I refused. He started to get irritated and insisted I slide down the fire pole. I said no. He insisted again. I said no, and started screaming. He got angry and carried me home, screaming and crying. I wanted to please my father, yet I disappointed him. I felt weak and like there was something wrong with me. One day when I was 4, my father took me to the park near our house. I loved my dad so much, and it was so exciting to spend time together, just him and me. He pushed me on the swing, and I flew into the air, laughing with glee. I scrambled up the ladder and went down the slide, and he caught me at the bottom. Then he encouraged me to go down the fire pole, but I was scared. He tried again, saying I'd be fine and he'd catch me like he did on the slide. I refused. He started to get irritated and insisted I slide down the fire pole. I said no. He insisted again. I said no. No one knew it yet, but the nerves and muscles in my hands and feet weren't developing correctly due to a form of muscular dystrophy. Intuitively, 4-year-old me wasn't sure I'd be able to hold on to the pole. I loved my father more than anything in the world and didn't want to disappoint him. Yet I chose to protect myself and take care of my body. I screamed and cried at someone trying to tell me they knew more about my body than me. I was very brave. Good evening, I'm Evan Spengler, bringing you the evening news. We have received word that Leslie's mother has died. This is an exclusive tonight, and our whole news team will be covering this shocking, unexpected event. I want to turn first to Wanda Zeddemore with the weather. Wanda, what's it like out there? Well, it's sad, Evan. It's raining. Wait, Leslie likes rain, so it's sunny. It's a blistering hot, sunny day, and there's a glare so strong it hurts your eyes even with sunglasses. It's like that. And it's all very confusing. It's like thunder snow. Yes, thank you, Wanda. We are in the business of words, yet at times like this, sometimes words fail us. I want to turn now to Rachel Stantz, who is on the scene with Leslie. Rachel, can you tell us what is happening now? Thanks, Evan. I am standing outside a hotel. Leslie and her husband and their Maltese have stopped here for the night on the way to the funeral. Leslie's been in the shower for over an hour. She's curled up on the floor of the tub with the lights off and water pounding, and she doesn't seem to know what to do. The husband and the dog are starting to get a bit concerned. Thank goodness for the hotel's industrial-sized hot water tank, though the floral smell of the little bar of hotel soap is starting to permeate everything. Only time will tell when or if Leslie can climb her way out of that bathtub. Back to you, Evan. Sad, sad day indeed. Let's hope she makes her way to a warm, fluffy towel. I want to go now to Paul Venkman, Arts and Culture. Paul, what's your take on today's events? Well, Evan, you know what they say, good art comes from grief and loss. I mean, if Munch was happy, do you think he'd have painted a picture of a person screaming like that? Have you seen that painting? It's terrifying, and it's worth like $120 million. Real art comes from pain. I wouldn't be surprised if this event fuels Leslie's creative endeavors for decades to come. I hear your point, Paul. Makes me wonder, though, What happens when a story is so disrupted by an event that the thread is lost forever? What does it take to reclaim that thread, or perhaps find a new one? Well, that's the news for this evening. Thank you, Paul, and thanks to our entire news team. Good night. There's a science fiction in the space between you and me, a fabrication of a grand scheme where I am the scary monster. I eat the city as I leave the scene. In my spaceship I am laughing. In your remembrance of your bad dream, there's no one but you standing. In the late 1990s, I completed all the coursework and a thesis to get an MFA in directing from Florida State University. In 1999, I graduated with a master's in theater from Florida State. In the late 1990s, I completed all the coursework and a thesis to get a Master's of Fine Arts in Directing from Florida State University. My mother died unexpectedly the week before the opening of my first show as an MFA director. My father married her sister, my aunt, a year and a half later. I struggled to find ground. I failed a directing requirement because I cried in front of my cast during a rehearsal. I was told I failed not for any lack of artistic merit, but because I lost control of the rehearsal room. I was grieving. I was given the option of repeating a year of the MFA program or transferring to the MA track, a less prestigious program. In 1999, I graduated with a master's in theater from FSU. For my thesis, I wrote and directed a hero's journey story about a young woman who loses her mother and has to reclaim her birthright on her own. In the late 1990s, I completed all the coursework and a thesis to get an MFA in directing from Florida State. While pursuing my MFA, I took a course called Gender and Race in Performance. It changed my way of viewing myself and the world around me. I decided to devote my artistic life to addressing the dynamics of power and privilege through the performing arts. When I shared this with the head of the MFA program, he said, "Leslie, there are no problems with the roles for women in modern American theater. Furthermore, you are no longer allowed to bring up issues of gender or race in class. We are doing A Streetcar Named Desire this year. There are 2 great roles for women in that show, and we practice colorblind casting and do an August Wilson play every February. These issues you keep talking about, they're just reality. It's just the way the world is. I really think you should get some help. You need therapy. You keep saying you want to say something with your work, Leslie. You have nothing to say." In 1999, I graduated with a master's in theater from Florida State. In the late 1990s, I completed all the coursework and a thesis to get an MFA in directing from Florida State. While pursuing my MFA, I took a course called Gender and Race in Performance. It was taught by a leading feminist scholar, and it changed my way of viewing myself and the world around me. I was suddenly aware of social injustice and how it is perpetuated through popular storytelling. My teacher became my mentor, and I decided to devote my artistic life to addressing the dynamics of power and privilege through the performing arts. My thesis was a hero's journey story with a female lead that incorporated circus acts and original music and challenged gender norms by degendering bodies and voices. In 1999, I graduated with a master's in theater from FSU. A GoFundMe testimonial. Leslie is a person who has a vision of the power that an authentic artist can have in the world. She is also someone willing to take the road less traveled in order to deliver that authenticity. If you are reading this at a time that you feel hopeful about people and their dreams, or if this is a moment where you are moved by human potential, then I can tell you that Leslie Grasha is a worthy recipient of your faith and optimism. She is the real thing, someone who is willing to matter and who is on the road to making a difference. Daryl Grant, jazz musician and professor of music at Portland State University. An email from my uncle. Leslie, someone had to write you and put you in check, and I guess it has to be me, since your parents are both gone, God rest their souls. I cannot believe you are out there begging on the internet this way. It's humiliating. You are a disgrace to this family, and your parents are rolling over in their graves at your behavior. You should be ashamed of yourself. My GoFundMe campaign raised $11,015. $25 of this came from my family. The Quest. This is Leslie. Once upon a time, she went on a quest to find her story. It was stolen by an evil witch many years ago, but Leslie didn't know it. Before realizing her story was missing, she just wandered around for decades, never sure what the hell was happening. Trauma is a bitch. The witch hid Leslie's story in the dark recesses of her mind. She gathered the necessary supplies for her quest. Every quester needs a compass, and a map, and snacks. Gluten-free. Before embarking upon the quest, she petitioned the gods for support. Leslie was unsure where in her mind she would find her story, and she didn't know where to begin looking. It was a tangled labyrinth of children's books and trauma in there. Within her mind, there were many realms to explore, including shit my parents said, medical trauma and stupid doctors, and regrettable romantic relationships. There was a lot of ground to cover there. She consulted her compass. Is Leslie's story hidden in an overabundance of higher education? My sources say no. She traveled far and wide for many years. There were dangers and pitfalls along the way. She finally found her story in the sovereign territory, the death of my mother. There was a box. It was filled with mushrooms. After a strange few hours she can't quite remember, she realized that she was the powerful witch. She had stolen her own story, so it was never really lost. Oh, shit. She decided she liked the hat, though. It was a good fit. At the height of COVID, I had a bad fall and ended up in the hospital for 3 days. It took me months to recover fully. I had a lot of support in the process. At the height of COVID, I had a bad fall and ended up in the hospital. It took me months to recover fully. I received a lot of support in the process. I felt like a burden because people had to support me. I was told for much of my life that I would be a burden, and now it was happening. I was very ashamed. At the height of COVID, I had a bad fall and ended up in the hospital. It took me months to recover fully. I received a lot of support in the process. When I expressed surprise and gratitude at all the help I was given, numerous people said, You support so many others. Let us support you. The old story that I was a burden no longer fit in my mind. I was filled with gratitude. Leave the pity and the blame for the ones who do not speak. You write the words to get respect and compassion, and for posterity. You write the words and make believe there is truth in the space between. Since I was 6 years old, I have regularly visited another world. It's like a daydream, except I can't control the events that happen there. People come into the world, they live, they die. I grieve them, yet I can't change the outcome. It's like I'm watching a movie in my mind and I never know where the story is going. It's been the same continually evolving world for 45 years. I could never publish this story. It's not at all original. It started with a wizard. When I was 6, my mom took me to see a community theater production of Camelot. During the performance, I had to pee. As my mom snuck me out of the theater, we saw Merlin going into the men's room. I was in awe. I understood that he was a real person pretending to be a wizard, but he wore a long blue robe and a big pointy hat with stars and moons on it, and he had a long white beard. I knew he wasn't really Merlin, but what if he was? And also, Merlin used the bathroom. Shortly after this, a wizard from the other world visited me. He wore a long blue robe and a big pointy hat with stars and moons on it, and he had a long white beard. He would meet me in the woods behind my house and teach me magic. One day, he took me to his world and introduced me to the Elf Queen. She didn't like humans, but she respected the wizard, so she agreed to give me refuge in the Elf City when I was in the other world. I grew up in the Elf City, traveling back and forth between that world and this one. When I was 12, the wizard died. I was so sad. I desperately tried to bring him back, but he was gone. My first love was a half-elf, half-human boy with messy brown hair. He died when I was 18. I still miss him. Around that time, I realized I could learn about myself by paying attention to what happened in the other world. I couldn't change what happened there, yet I could change how I thought and acted in this world and see the reflections there. I wasn't always a nice person in the other world. I hurt someone terribly because I was selfish and cared more about my needs than theirs. I still regret my actions. And the loss of my dear friend there was just as painful as my divorce in this world. None of the people in that world have names. They don't need them. I know them by their hair, their clothes, their smells, and the sounds of their voices. I know them by how they hug me. And I know their stories, and they know mine. I was in college before I realized not everyone has their own parallel world. I was shocked by this. I just assumed everyone spent large portions of their life elsewhere. I never talked about my world with anyone before then to compare notes, and I rarely spoke about it after. It was sacred to me, and also very ordinary. In 2016, I did my thesis performance for Naropa's MFA in Contemporary Performance program. It was about living with muscular dystrophy and finding healing, though not curing. The performance was a ritual that changed me at a cellular level. After this, I couldn't access the other world for over 3 years. I felt lost. I didn't know how to navigate this world without that one. After an EMDR session, I realized that up to that point, my whole life had been leading up to the fulfillment of a quest. And in my thesis performance, I completed the quest. Without that storyline, the world disappeared. When I started the MDiv program, the world came back online. It was different. I was picking up the pieces after the quest, discovering the world anew. Mostly the same people were there, though some were gone. I mourned them. and there were new people to get to know. I'm still finding my new place in the other world, and I'm preparing for a new quest. It feels exciting. I'm sure a psychologist could have a field day with my other world, and I don't care. It's mine. I know when I'm there and when I'm here, and I'm quite comfortable with the boundaries I have set around this. I know the other world isn't real to anyone else, yet to me, it is every bit as real as this one. And it offers me a mirror to better know myself and others. And it helps me not take this world so seriously. Isn't that what all good stories are for? When my husband left me, he said he wanted a relationship like his friends Sam and Kathy had. Theirs was the perfect marriage, he said, and he was leaving me to go find his Kathy. I wasn't it. Soon after this, Kathy and I became friends. A year later, Kathy left Sam. She said she admired me and the freedom and joy I had found after the divorce. She wanted that for herself. SAFETY, safe, dance. We can dance if you want to. We can leave your friends behind. Because your friends don't dance, and if they don't dance, well, they're no friends of mine. Say, we can go where we want to, a place where they will never find. And we can act like we come from out of this world, leave the real one far behind. And we can dance or sing. We can go when we want to. Night is young, and so am I. And we can dress real neat from our hats to our feet and surprise them with a victory cry. We can act if we want to. If we don't, nobody will. And you can act real rude and totally removed, and I can act like an imbecile and say, we can dance. We can dance. Everything's out of control. We can dance. We can dance. They're doing it from pole to pole. We can dance. We can dance. Everybody look at your hands. We can dance. We can dance. Everybody's taking the chance. I told the same story for 26 years about living with trauma and chronic illness. I wrote the same play with different titles countless times. I desperately wanted someone to hear me, hear my story. In the fall of 2019, my first semester in the MDiv program, I did a Naropa alumni Spark Talk around this topic. In preparing this talk, I heard my story, really heard it. And when I could hear my story, the audience could hear it too. It was a powerfully healing experience for me, and I felt like I had exorcised this demon for good. I was ready to tell new stories. Then I started CPE, the formal training for chaplains, as part of the MDiv program. As a spiritual caregiver, I was suddenly talking with many different people every week, people struggling with chronic illness, disability, trauma, divorce. And I started hearing the same story over and over and over again. My story, their story. And I realized I have to keep telling my story because I'm a storyteller and I can. I tell my own story for those who don't feel safe enough or strong enough or well enough to tell their own. I tell my story for those who can't yet find their voice. I tell my story in the hopes that it will inspire others to tell theirs because I want to hear them. When you don't feel heard, it can be challenging to hear. I'm sorry for all the times I didn't listen to a story and hear its divine brilliance. For all the times I marginalized others in a desperate attempt to avoid being marginalized. For the times I acted out of my own pain and inflicted pain on others in the process. For the times I denied my own privilege and took power from others. I now honor my own story and elevate other stories as well. Speak, and I will listen you into being. I will walk with you into the darkness and hold your hand. I will bear witness to your tears and your laughter. I will sit beside you while the earth whispers the mysteries of the universe into your ear. Speak. You are not alone. There is fiction in the space between you and everybody. Give us all what we need. Give us one more sad, sordid story. But in the fiction of the space between, sometimes a lie is the best thing.
And I think it's time for applause. Well done, Leslie.
Woohoo! Bravo, Leslie!
Wow, Leslie, congratulations!
Oh, so beautiful. Oh my God, I'm just crying. So beautiful. Love you, love you, love you.
So good to see you.
Congratulations.
Wow. Oh, so good.
I got all these faces.
Congrats, Leslie.
I was in my own little world there, like there was nobody else here. One advantage to performing on Zoom, I'll tell you. Like,
So great, honey. Really great.
Thank you, Leslie.
Leslie, thank you. Wow.
So good.
So beautiful. Beautiful theater.
Yeah,
better
Leslie,
in the
that was
time of
lovely.
COVID. All right, I'm gonna let Jay do his thing and I'll be quiet.
Well done, Leslie. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So we're going to move into a talk back phase. Anybody, everyone is free to go. The performance has ended. If you can't say, that would be excellent. We're still recording, so just kind of keep that in mind. Although I'm not entirely sure what Leslie's plan for this. I doubt it is YouTube publication. Probably not. So as we get started, I want to give us a couple of ground rules. So I'm going to invoke new play rules on the talkback since this is a new play. So I do understand that we have faculty in the audience, and I know how that goes. However, for the next 15 minutes, okay, that's all. Please do not say what you would do, like if you had written or performed this play, like that. It's not the time for that kind of commentary. Please do say what you saw or felt or observed during the performance. That's the kind of feedback that's helpful for a new work. And then for, again, like the next 15 minutes, I'm going to ask Leslie not to say anything, but just to listen for the time being. And then we'll have a chance to we'll do a Q&A kind of in phase 2. Excuse me. So first question for everyone, and feel free to put your answer in the chat or shout out, although we have like a lot of bodies in the room, so maybe the chat would be better for right now. Just give a one-word reaction to the performance. If you had to sum this up in a single word, put it in the chat. Go for it. I'm trying to figure out how to get us back onto. Guess this might be the time for gallery view, I suppose. Intimate, authentic, brave, raw, wow, hearts, moving, wholeness, brilliant, inspiring, original, majestic, powerful, brilliant, journey, mesmerizing, enlightening, excellent, excellent. Humorous, yes, I agree. I agree. I'd read several drafts of this, but not the final draft, and there were several moments that an emotional hug. Yes. Yes, yes. Funny. Awe. Awe. Full of awe. Absolutely. Okay, more specific question. And if you feel like typing, type. If you'd rather speak, that's great, but we would need to take turns. So what stood out to you? What were the more, my question was going to be, what were the powerful moments? Clearly, we had a string of very powerful moments, but if there's any one of those vignettes or pieces that stood out to you, raise your hand, come on to me. We'll need to take turns. But what stood out? Anybody who wants to share out? Go ahead, Heather.
I really loved the iterations. So when a story was told in different ways repeatedly, so I don't think that happened with every single story, but I loved that each time it happened.
Thank you. The variations on the theme, the triptychs. Eric agrees. Stephanie, the other world, and Jeff also mentioned the other world. Jeff or Stephanie, would you care to tell us more about that?
The story of the other world. I mean, I felt like it just had so much imagery, and it's like I could, as I was listening, I could see this world that she was talking about. So it was just very magical.
Thank you, Stephanie. The fire pole, a couple of people are chiming in with that. The 5-year-old that took care of herself. And again with the triptych, and I think and when Leslie hit on this and I read that first draft, I mean that like tells us everything that we need to know about the whole rest of the piece. The reframing. Well, I shouldn't be sharing. I'm supposed to be asking questions. I'm also an audience member. Other moments that stood out. Would anyone like to speak to anything about something that impacted them? Damaging feedback from faculty. Not from Naropa faculty, of course. And the uncle. Second question. What did you most relate to? And this can be on a very individual basis, but this is actually a question that Leslie wanted me to put to the crowd. So what connected with your own experiences? If anyone is willing to share. Oh, Erica, go ahead.
Yes, I think the translucent quality of story, and it's like there were stories, but they also had so much transparency, and they weren't solid, and they were moving, and it just was so touching to me, that quality of, yes, it's a story, but it's also unreal, and it's real, and it just that in between place was, I appreciated that so much. It totally resonated with me.
Excellent.
Thank you, Leslie.
Excellent. Thank you, Erica. Jeff is in a space that's too loud for him to come onto mic. He says, iterations of understanding traumatic experience in order to integrate it. Yeah. The repetition and revision with the triptychs. Sharing a story over and over until I fully receive it myself. Thank you, Jamie. Oh yeah, Heather, go ahead.
Unfortunately, I can't remember this, like the point in the narrative when this happened. So I'm sorry about that. But there was at one point where I felt really bad about failings that I had done, like things that I hadn't followed through on or not shown up for people. And I'm getting upset about it now. And just a little bit later in the piece, there was, I don't know if it might have been the atonement section, or again, I can't place it, but I felt forgiveness and acceptance. And so I felt better. I mean, I sort of like got to the sort of low point, and then it helped me out of that again. So
Wow.
that was very powerful for me.
Nice. Thank you, Heather. If I had to guess, I would guess probably that atonement section. If I had to make a guess. Uh-oh. The mundaneness / magical juxtaposition of the other world. Yeah, that seemed to strike a chord with a lot of people, Leslie. Okay. Feel free to keep chiming in, but I will give you a second question, or I guess on a third question now. This is very much a playwright's kind of question. Were there moments that were confusing? Were there moments where you lost the thread or the narrative? Erica and
Wendell, hi.
Thank you.
No, there was not one moment when that happened at all. And I was sitting here thinking a bit about, I mean, the overall tenor of this and is generosity. I mean, extraordinary generosity. And I felt like I was taken by the hand into a story, and I felt really secure, and I could really have, my experience. I mean, you made a lot of space through that generosity by exposing your, sense, by, being so brave yourself. So, I mean, and it's very consistent. It was really consistent. So thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Wendell. A little bit more of the chat. Things people are connecting with, eating a snack and petitioning the gods before going on a journey. Gluten-free snacks. Very important. The newscasters gave me, this is from Tammy, to me, it gave the feeling of experiencing something so big that you're kind of watching yourself in the moment as well and reacting in multiple ways that don't feel entirely coherent, and definitely got that sense of multiple perspectives from that bit. Love the names of the newscasters, by the way, which I did not hear until the performance tonight. DeMason can relate to the grace towards oneself that comes with age and experience. So very beautiful. And Leslie, and I'll comment again. I know you said like this is a story you've told for 26 years, and it seems like there's a reason you've had to tell it and retell it, and like clearly you weren't ready to be done with this story 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. You were not done yet with that. Eric, I didn't connect right away the repetition of the story in different ways with a partner at the end about writing the same play over and over again. Now that you point, now that you point that out, clearly it's there. The form, it does what it is about.
I didn't either. Thank you, Eric.
That is the best kind of play. It does the thing that it is talking about. This is why art is so wonderful. This is why you have to ask the audience. All right, feel free to keep chiming in. Would anyone, Leslie wanted me to invite you, if anyone would like to share a story of your own. The theme is stories, which is very open-ended. But if anyone has a story on a similar theme or something that maybe they've struggled with to tell and retell, Leslie wanted to share that space with everyone in the audience. Leslie, Rob, and I met doing playback theater, which, if you're unfamiliar, is a form of theater where members of the audience tell true stories about themselves that the players then recreate improvisationally on the spot with the goals of empowering the storyteller and creating community among the audience. So this is kind of where we got our start together. By the way, thank you for Rob for stage managing.
I wanted to say something.
Please.
I just, Leslie, the telling the story over and over again. Leslie knows I'm a massage therapist and cranial psychotherapist. I do somato-emotional release, and 70% of my clientele was affected by the Marshall Fire. And I feel like that very much is what is being experienced by the survivors of the fire, is that importance of telling and retelling and being heard, being listened to, and finding different layers each time in whatever story they're telling. So I just wanted to say thanks, Leslie.
So Kelly, follow-up question, is that something that like connects to your like massage practice where they speak to you, or are these unrelated?
Yeah, I do emotional release work, so
Okay.
emotional release work. So dealing with a lot of PTSD and anxiety and depression and effects of the fire.
Got
So,
it. Got it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Leslie.
Well, I think I will unmute Leslie. Would anyone like to pose questions to her as performer or playwright or person even? Reminding the faculty that this is not a defense. I can't see all the hands, so if you have something, just go ahead and chime in.
This is Jamie, and I'd just like to hear a little bit more about what you discovered in the process.
It was a crazy process. So I had a whole different, full, complete play that I wrote that was going to be my thesis. And I'd started working on it last fall, and really, it's done. I mean, and then when I realized with Zoom that I probably wouldn't be able to perform it live, I was looking at adapting that piece for Zoom, and it just wasn't landing, and I wasn't, and something just wasn't there. And I love the piece. I'm very proud of it, and I want to do it one day, but it just wasn't, it's like there was no energy behind it for right now. And so suddenly I realized I need to write another piece. And like, I think if I had had more time to think about it, I would have chickened out. Like, I don't think I would have written this piece, because as these stories started coming out, and especially with like relating to the Spark Talk, and thinking, dang it, I didn't want to do this this story again. I didn't want to write about myself again. And yet, as I kind of say in the piece, that I'm hearing day after day after day, I'm working with clients who are like, it's like I'm hearing my own words coming out of other people's mouths day after day after day. And it just like it just cracked my heart open to just, and made me realize that I am a storyteller. I can tell stories. I know how to, and I've reached some level of ground with lots of my story. So it just suddenly realized, no, I have to do this about myself. And I just really went into Reiki, and I went into my shamanic practice, and I didn't know what this beast was going to look like. And I spent days just not knowing and terrified, and seeing this deadline coming up of April 1st, and people are coming to watch this thing, and I don't have a show. And then all of a sudden it just, I like wrote it all, and basically the whole thing came out in a day. And then I started, and I will say that was Monday. So I've spent like this week finishing it, and like I said, I think if I had more time, I wouldn't have done this. I mean, it was just last night when I was really doing a rehearsal that I went, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, it's especially the other world piece, like, to share that is just, that's like the most vulnerable thing. And it was like, no, that's what I got to do. Like, you know, part of me is like, no, this is it. And part of me is like, ugh. So I'm like, so it was this like gestation process. And this also feels like a capstone, because this really feels like all of the pieces that I've integrated through the MDiv program, like really gathering all of what I've learned through up to this semester in CPE. So like, I also couldn't have written this until now, because so much of it is informed by even the last month and a half of hearing clients saying the same thing. And so it was a really it's kind of a magical process, and I'm really proud of it, and I'm really it feels very special. I'm like, it feels really special to share this with everybody, and it feels like a capstone. It feels like this really is pulling within myself all the pieces of the last 3 years. And the piece about the other world, where my story, my other world, didn't come back online until I started the MDiv program, and that was a really hard 3 years for me to not have it. It was like I lost a compass, and so it was interesting to look at it from that perspective too.
Thank you, Leslie.
You know, Leslie, it's so interesting. It's like, even though, you know, you form them on the page, the words on the page recently, it's like you've been writing this story your whole life. And that's so amazing. And, you know, listening to this, it's like you do have a magic, and it's like a story cleanse. I felt like as I was listening to your story, like other stories of my own life went before my eyes, as I'm listening to yours. So there's just this gift in this. So I just had to share that. Story cleanse is what this was.
Other questions for Leslie? Feel free to chime in if you think of something. Leslie, what questions do you have for your audience?
I really feel like I so appreciated your questions at the top, Jay. Thank you so much. I mean, that really covered kind of my questions and all the feedback I'm still integrating. I don't know, there's part of me that feels like I could develop this further, and I'm kind of sitting with, with that. And I see Wendell and Eric are nodding, like, okay, that's what I need. Okay, that's answer, yes. Because it feels like, there's more. Like, I even added a piece this afternoon. I was driving down the road and heard the song Safety Dance and was like, I got to do that. Like, and so like literally this afternoon, I'm calling Stephanie going, oh my God, am I insane? Is this okay? And so, so yes, thank you. I'm a little right now. So that just happened. So yeah, thank you. Thank you
Okay,
all. I'm
excellent.
so grateful for
Excellent.
for all the feedback.
Well, we are pretty much at time, and this seems like a really excellent note on which to bring things to a close. Thank you, everyone. Let's give Leslie one more round of applause.
Job, Leslie.
Hooray, hooray.
Leslie!
And thank you to Jay and Rob, and then also to Stephanie Wilbert, who really, and Tammy also like just helped me with some script review and rehearsals. So thank you all.
The after party's at your house. Your
Hi,
house.
gluten-free.
See you in about 10 minutes.
Bye. Thank you all so
Thank you,
much.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Love you, Leslie.
Love you.
Well
Thank you.
done.
Love you, Leslie.
Hi, Danielle.
Ah.
Miss you.
It's a Zoom reunion.
I'm going to stop the recording.
Yeah, stop the recording. I don't want to end the meeting though, because I want to read all the stuff in the chat that I didn't have a chance to read yet.